Hi, this is Alichi from the Curvy Cauldron, and today we will be talking about creative communication. Creative communication is something like creative writing, like poetry, like a play, like a short story, comedy. What else? But it's essentially communication that goes places direct communication can only dream of. Today, I want to focus on comedy and humor and the way it shows up both in written works, in spoken works like stand up comedy or spoken word poetry or rap, and also the way it can become a stepping stone for things to piggyback off. And just the way it comes from, you interacting with culture, you interacting with the environment, you interacting with other people. And I'll never forget, I was listening to, I think it's Ace and Trumpets by The Cliffs, aka Pusha T and his brother Malice, where Malice said, "Never turn the other cheek, you die at the Oscars." And it brought up, like, see how he piggybacked off of that cultural moment and added it to a song. And when you think of that moment when Chris Rock and Will Smith, when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock, you will remember why that is a funny line, even though it was put in poetry, which I think rap is poetry. Not like it's just a part of rap that is poetry that you're just like, whoa. And you know, saw that, and it can be, you can see humor, you can see questions, you can see like just different things about life expressed in rap. And yeah, the coochie thing can be part of it too. The, my titties is bigger than yours, my equipments are better than yours can also be part of it, but it is not all of it. And I love it when certain things make references to certain other things and then forms and adds to the whole story. But I think comedy is a type of creative communication that appeals to the 13th sense, if you will. And I mean that by, like the touch sense, smell, taste, intuition, balance. Those are, it feels like all the senses are taken up until the number 12. So I think comedy goes to like a certain part of our psyche, or like it appeals to a certain, like, the sense that we can't control. So while comedy can be deeply healing, it can also be deeply hurtful. And jokes can stay for a lifetime. Like things that have been made to dig at people's self esteem. Like you see someone that you consider completely gorgeous, right? And sometimes they just open their mouth and say things that have been said to them at a time in their life when they maybe haven't grown into their futures or whatever, and it still impacts the way they see themselves. Comedy can be a great leveler, whether from the person telling the joke or the person listening to it. There is this vulnerability that is expressed and exchanged. And that is why comedy can either help stereotypes and hurtful perceptions prevail or dismantle them. Uh, and I think music is also another thing that can appeal to that part of us or that sense, in us. And there is one man in this world that I think his 13th sense needs to be studied, and that is Jimmy Fallon. Because you could come to the show and be like, "Hello, Jimmy," and he'd be like, I don't know. He laughs a lot. So I think it's a good thing to laugh a lot. Don't get me wrong. But I think his 13th sense needs to be studied because he finds everything funny. And again, I don't think anybody can take his job because he will make you feel comfortable in the show and he will make you laugh and he will laugh at your jokes. And whether he finds everything funny or not is not, it's part of the conversation, but it's not the bigger conversation. Because I think when you go there and you feel comfortable, and it's part of it as a host to make the guest comfortable, and laughing at someone's jokes, whether it's funny or not, is one of the ways to make them comfortable. So I think he does a good job of that, but I still think he needs to be studied. But one thing about comedy that I love is that it exposes certain things. It asks certain questions. It can poke around at things and make you ask a question that you've been skirting around. So somebody can skirt around something with a joke, but it probes at a bigger issue or it probes at something. And I was watching an episode of The Breakfast Club. I don't know how, if it's an old one or a new one, I don't know, but they had the comedian Donnell Rollins on there, and he was talking about something brought about the conversation of some comedy skit he did that one a member of the Breakfast Club, I think it was Lauren, that went to the comedy skit and saw him. But it was something about Cassie and Diddy, but and it was about the video that was floating around in the internet about the hotel room, not the hotel room, but the hotel hallway video that saw Diddy with a towel running around. Um, Donnell made a joke, and the joke was I don't know, I wasn't there, and I don't know all about the joke, but the gist of the joke is, how did he run around without that towel falling off? That was just a joke, but it just that joke and how the whole trial thing and all that was such a sensitive information, like sensitive time, but he was able to skirt around it with a joke. That's and who knows what other questions that people in the audience are having in their mind from just hearing that joke, right? Another one I saw recently is the Lai Wasabi script, where he was talking about the road less traveled and how, Nigerian professors, uh, and maybe other professors in other parts of the world, but he went to a school in Nigeria. And he was just, there were many layers to that joke, not just the literature layers, but just the experience of going to school in Nigeria and how this you could be one assignment away from not graduating, and the teacher not having no qualms, or the professor having no qualms of making you repeat the whole um the whole set just because of a little notoriety, like just because of something minor, like not finding a joke funny or not finding what some great professor wrote funny. And it's so interesting how that joke, it's funny, but people also do not find it funny because it probes into a bigger issue, and it asks certain questions that even the teacher themselves can look back at and be like, yeah, that was mean. Yeah. But there are people at this that are still suffering because of things like that. One of the reasons why I find comedy so interesting is because sometimes it can feel like the last um barrier to truth telling. It can feel like, as we come into an arena in the world where a lot of things are being censored, I feel like comedy is one of the last areas that can ask certain questions and even we see now that even comedians are also being censored. And why one of the reasons for this is, there is the cultural aspect to it, there is the religious aspect to it, there's the political aspect to it, there is, the gender aspect to it. There are certain things that affect um humor, and by extension comedy. But you have to be discerning as a comedian in the way you approach comedy. And not just that, you have to be, even if you're writing it out, let's say you're putting it in a play, you're putting it in a song, something to make people laugh, you have to be discerning. And it's very important to protect that part of you. If you're a comedian, if you're a writer, whatever you are, it's very important to protect that part of you that thinks. Remember, I did a video before, I'll link it here, and it was just talking about how you have to be limitless in your thinking, but you also need to be discerning in how you deliver it, but with tone, so that you're not just scratching and talking, and nobody is listening to you. So, for example, when it comes to culture, and this can be popular culture and also culture as in cultural traditions. So that never turn the other cheek, you'll die at the Oscars. That Malice of the Clips said in that song Ace and Trumpets. Somebody could try to make a similar joke and it will not land. And so it's very important to, if you're doing something that's in popular culture, it's very important to actually know what you're talking about. That way, if you're trying to make a joke about something, you deliver it in a way that it is received however you want it to be received. Now, there are times where things can be taken out of context and people can be make a mountain out of molehills. There are times like that. But you can't just be shooting off the mouth like woo all the time. You can't be doing that. And another thing is discernment. When it comes to discernment and when it comes to social cues, there are times where, like, for example, maybe not laughing at someone's joke can be one of the reasons why you're not being promoted. I don't know. Let's say your boss is very notorious for making jokes about the office. Like every little thing, he has the office joke for something. There are times, one thing I like about comedy is that there are times where someone makes a joke, and when you put two and two together, even though it's not something that makes you laugh hua, 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 from the inside, it's something that when you put two and two together, you can see why it's funny. And then you do the, oh, wow, interesting. You do that, right? You understand why it's funny, even though it's not like that guttural laugh that it pulls out of you. You know what I mean? So, for example, when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock at the Oscars, if you watch the video, it looked like he was laughing and everybody was laughing. But so, which means there is that it was funny to him, like that he had that guttural laugh, or maybe it was the performative laugh, who knows. But then reality dawned on him, which is why I said comedy touches places where um, it touches unconscious places where sometimes when you finally consciously think about what is being said, you go, oh shit, this person is my wife. I should not be laughing at this. Let me go up and slap this man for talking crap about my wife in front of me and my wife, right? So, so there are times where, you're laughing at something and then all the things start coming in, I don't know, the political ideology comes in. Okay, I'm not supposed to be laughing at this. The be nice to your neighbor thing comes in. You're like, oh Jesus, I'm not supposed to be laughing at this. I'm not supposed to be laughing at this. And then you go. And should we be more sensitive to people and their plights as a society? Absolutely. But should we be, I think we are also at the cusp of having that discussion where just because you think something doesn't mean you should say it, right? So you as an artist, you as a writer, you as a comedian, it's one of the things, everything has a light side and a dark side, or a bright side and a underbelly side, whatever, right? So your limitless thinking is for your private journal. Now, how you deliver that to other people, how you deliver it at your stand up, how you deliver it to people you're talking to, is something that you now have to think about and also filter before it comes out. Now, there are times where you want it to come out raw like that, and you gotta do what you gotta do. But there are times where you understand how things can be taken out of context and you want to pointedly deliver a certain message a certain way. So you filter it to come out the way you want it to come out, right? And another thing too is when it comes to gender things. And I have noticed that uh, men and women, the dynamics between men and women are different. How they relate to each other are different. Um, it's hard to, how do I say it this way? So, the way men fight is different from the way women fight, right? Men are more um, likely to get into, fist fights with each other, right? Women are more likely to, now there are women that will beat your ass. Don't get it twisted. But women are more likely to throw underhanded compliments, or underhanded jabs disguised as compliments, or just say something mean with a smile. So when you think of it that way, the way people joke with each other in an all female dynamic is different from the way people joke with each other in an all male dynamic. And it's also different from the way people joke with each other in a mixed dynamic, where there is men and there is women there, right? So, and also there is a part of it that plays into, again, I'm a woman observing, looking into the world of men. I will never be a man amongst men, and I don't want to be a man amongst men. But looking in, it looks like there is a certain expectation to, like, can't take a joke, take a joke. You can't, oh, what, you can't take a joke amongst men. So sometimes, even when something is hurtful to them, they will laugh, but then they will complain about it to their wife or to their girlfriend or whatever. But they will laugh. Like, I have seen a man make a joke about another man. Now, you may not know what that man is going through in his life, but I have seen a man that was expecting a baby with his wife, right? And his friend is like, oh, looks like that one got into the goalpost or something like that, right? Now, if they have been having trouble conceiving, that could be a joke that could be hurtful. No one knows, right? You don't really know the intimate life of this man. So if that's something, and maybe if it's part, he's or something health wise with him that was causing this, I can see where that can be hurtful to that man. But he just laughed it off and walked off. Now, as a woman, will I make that joke with a friend? No. Would I make it with an associate? No. Now, there are times, or there have been times, in my young adult life, like I'll say when I was at the cusp, when I was in secondary school, but I'll say when I was at the cusp of what people here will refer to as, what people in America will refer to as middle school into high school, where we were all developing into our bodies. And, you know, there were times when I made jokes. They were not okay to my friends about something they did, or some kind of thing. I just thought it was funny because the guys, you if you go to class, like sometimes I joke like that with the guys and they joke like that with me, and I was like, okay, I would joke like that with my friend too. But then that's something you learn as you grow into a woman. And that's also something that you understand where what boundaries are and what you shouldn't do to a person. I'm not saying you should not joke with your friends. But so for example, if a friend is always like, I'm coming, but they're 2 hours late. Yeah, of course, that's gonna be a joke that you make, right? But if a friend has, let's say, an insecurity about, I don't know, maybe one of her eyelashes is like cute or whatever, and you know that they have that insecurity, even if it's the funniest thing you've seen in your life, I will not be caught making that joke to whether it's a friend or an associate. No, because now you are aware. Now you know. Now you know that it is hurtful to them. And now you will not make these jokes to them. So that is where I feel like that is where men and women are different. So sometimes when women make mean jokes to you, it signals something else. It signals fights. It signals that we are fighting now versus, men making mean jokes to each other. And also in mixed dynamics, at a certain time, you also grow out of, so in, for example, me, in at that stage in my life, I considered it banter. Like someone will say something and I'll say another thing, and we're going back and forth. And we're like teenagers going back and forth. But then you start to see how things, as you grow, you start to see how that dynamic changes. And you start seeing that you are a woman and there are certain things that a man will say to you that will be hurtful to your feelings and are not okay. And even though they might be funny, or even though um you might find one of those things funny, you also don't want to open that door where it slips into disrespect. So I feel like there's a certain place you get to. Let's say if you have male associates or co-workers or whatever, like there's certain place you will grow into that. Now if you have a different relationship with the people you associate with, go do you. But personally speaking, there's a place, a certain arena you will go to, and you start seeing that even though you may love this banter and you may find this funny, it can get to a place where it will slip into disrespect. And before you know it, you now become the butt of jokes that could be self deprecating. And even though I love a good laugh, I love a good dark humor sometimes, I don't love self deprecating jokes, and I don't like jokes that are made to belittle somebody or poke at their self esteem. And sometimes, if you get into this banter with someone and there's not that level of respect established, it can quickly slip into a roast section or some kind of humiliation tactic or whatever. And imagine something like that happening to you at a work setting or a place where you want to be taken seriously, but just because you've opened that door, that, oh, it's okay to say these things to me, now people feel um feel like it's better, they feel comfortable saying that to you in a serious work setting, right? And that can also, start to chip away at the kind of work you're doing. So yeah, that there is that for that gender thing there. One thing about humor and wit and comedy in general is how endearing it is. It's one of the qualities that can endear you to a person, or endear someone to you, or endear you to a social scene or crowd. And it's also one of the biggest ways to make a social faux pas or faux pas or whatever, which is why I think it also scares people in a way. I remember that mistress, one of the famous mistresses of Charles the Second. I think her name was Nell Gwyn. Humor was one of the things that endeared her to the king, and one of the qualities that she has really that continued, that helped to continue their relationship. He found her amusing, and she was also outrageous in other ways, and she was also an actress and she pulled a lot of stunts, but her humor, her wit, was one of the qualities that historians have praised about her. And another thing that I will say is that there are some environments that you have to play by ear, and you have to either dial it all the way down or dial it up, because it's such even though it is an incredibly powerful quality to have, it's also something that people can relegate to a certain corner, especially in environments that are touted as more serious, like let's say a work environment. Um, I think that's because humor has a certain association with vulnerability, and sometimes it can be seen as something that's not as important in certain environments. And because of that, you don't want to become the office clown. Or let's say if you're a black person, even if you're funny, there are environments that you go into, and environments where promotions and all those things depend on, you know, seriousness, or you don't want to be relegated to that. Sometimes if you're a black person and you go into certain areas, the burden of performance is somehow put onto you, and you're supposed to make people laugh or whatever, even if that is not your personality, or even if that is not the way you choose to show up in that environment. So that is something you have to be aware of, and do with that what you will. And another thing I will say about this is, while you should respect your friends and not poke at their things or not poke at their insecurities or whatever, we are all living life, and there are things that we go through that can pertain, that someone else may go through, that can pertain to them. And I feel like it's very important, if you're doing comedic work or you're writing comedy or something that could be delivered, and you want to deliver something and make it funny on paper or via speech, it's very important to draw that line between you and your friends or your family member or whatever. So, for example, if you're writing a story and let's say something that you included in the story happened to a friend 5 years ago, if it's something that you're basing solely on their life, maybe you should talk to them about that, right? But if it's something that is a general thing that happens to somebody and you want to make it into a joke or something, I feel like one of the big ways to, you know, put yourself in handcuffs is to start thinking, oh, what will Nkechi say about this? Oh, what will Choma say when she reads this? Oh, what will, I don't know, Ignatius say when he reads this? Like, that is a big way to just handcuff yourself and make yourself so unfunny. Like, it's Now, if you set out to humiliate your friends on paper and write about them and name them on paper, now I'm not talking to you. That is something you have to figure out within yourself. But I'm talking about letting, let's say one of your friends said, I don't like jokes about cats. And then you never make a joke about a cat in your comedy. Or somebody says, "Oh, I don't like jokes about dogs," and then you never make like now you're saying you're putting everybody's everything into your work, and that is one of the quick ways to you know put handcuffs on yourself, seriously. And also that is another way to like put a cap on your creativity. Yes, is it important to be sensitive to the plight of other people? Yes. Is it important to proceed with caution when you're addressing things that have to do with identity, like religion or um like very sensitive taboo topics or children or whatever, things like that, right? Is it important to proceed with caution and be sensitive and treat people with sensitivity and respect? Yes. But it's also very important to not let that caution become fear. It's very, very important.
Another example is Benny Mac. There is a comedy skit. If you go on YouTube, there's a lot of his comedy specials on there. But there was one where it was essentially about domestic violence, right? He was talking about popping his someone who I assume is his wife or was his wife, right? And in that skit, as he talked about that, he turned it in a way where even though you know that domestic violence is wrong and is people should not be smacking other people around, many people can relate to the feeling of maybe someone has annoyed you, right? And then that person now starts following you around the house or around the store or wherever they annoyed you, and they start asking you, "Oh, are you angry? Are you angry?" while you're boiling in anger. And then they follow you around, and then if you drink water, they will drink water. If you touch something, they will touch that same thing. If you say, "Oh, I'm going home," they'll say, "Okay, I'm going home." Like many people have been through that, and the vitriol you experience as a person when someone is doing that to you, people related to that. And I feel like that was one of the reasons why a lot of people laughed so hard at that joke. Yes, domestic violence is wrong, but I feel like people relating to the other part of that joke of when him explaining what the person did to him that caused him to lose control and smack that person. I think that was why people laughed. So, yes, comedy can touch, taboo topics or topics that are very, very sensitive. And this is one example of it.
Another aspect I find very interesting with comedy is just how it's not just the writing, it can be the delivery that makes it funny, the tone that makes it funny, the person that does it that makes it funny. It can be the history that makes it funny. Like, have you had that friend that always says something funny, so when they open their mouth to speak, before they even speak, you're already laughing because of the history, you think they're going to say something funny. Have you had like, and I feel like not just the tone or the delivery or like all these things, I feel like that also impacts, that also makes certain things funny, even when it's set up in a situation that's not funny. And let me give an example. In there's that um series, My Liberation Notes. I've written a couple articles about that on my website, the Curvy Cauldron. Even though My Liberation Notes is a melodrama, there are certain parts in that drama, certain episodes really that are just laden with humor, and it just makes you laugh out loud. I'll never forget when Chang Hee, played by Lee Min Ki, when he, when he entered Mr. Goo's room and saw, because Mr. Goo is a functioning alcoholic, and saw like a display of green soju bottles, and there's like the sunlight, shining on these bottles, right? And because he goes in without Mr. Go giving him the okay, and just basically he infiltrates Mr. Goo's life. But I don't know exactly what happened really, but Mr. Goo got mad and started chasing him, right? And Chinese friend brought water to play referee to give out the tune. Jesus Christ. I thought that was hilarious. And it also shows you, like, a lot of times men don't take things seriously. Like, they keep joking and joking and joking, and they realize, oh shit, this is serious. And then there is when, I think her name is Gijong, the older sister, played by Lee El. There's a place where she has, like, she's this accomplished office woman, career lady, all that. But there is this time where she went on a date and she was talking about she was talking to the guy she was on a date with about what she considers as true love or whatever, and she genuinely scared that guy because she was talking about gosh, I can't remember her name. The woman that carried John the Baptist's head. She's like, oh, I want when he's beheaded. Like, imagine the kind of love it takes to carry his head. That man was just looking at her like, are you crazy? And she did a lot of things that were just so hilarious. Like when one of the guys that she works with in the office, like, he's always hitting on all the girls, and he never hit on her. So she was really curious. Why did he never hit on? And then I think the part that just made it so funny was when um she was really trying to find love too. It was when she woke up in the middle of the night and knelt down and prayed to the to all the men that she has rejected to stop punishing her and help her find love. I thought that was hilarious. But there's that, and then you think of Dr. Cha. Now this one was a comedy, but it was basically this doctor that had needed a liver transplant, and her husband was cheating on her. Her husband was also a doctor, but that show was it was such an unserious show, but it was also interesting in a way. I never thought I would like it, but I ended up liking it. But there was a place, where because of her condition, she got like a disability sticker or whatever. So her husband, that man was something else. Her husband was also using this disability sticker to park in disability places. But one time she actually had like evidence that he was cheating on her. She removed the sticker from his car and then reported the car to be towed, right? And then but it was just, sometimes when you tell somebody that, it's not really that funny until you watch it. A lot of the things in Dr. Cha, like a lot of the funny things that happen in Dr. Cha, was driven home by the actors acting it out. And sometimes it's just a light bulb going off in your head, or you putting two and two together, or something is being implied by the way that person is delivering that role. Like her husband, say what you want about him, yes, he was a piece of shit, but he was a funny piece of shit. Like, I'll never forget when he threw away like something on the ground, because they live in this well kept estate, right? And then the security man caught him, and then he came out of his car and picked it up and went back and went back into his car. Either way, now if you told somebody that, it won't seem as funny. But seeing him do that, and just all the things he's done, it felt like, number one, the bad guy was getting his due, but it was also funny seeing how the actor played it out. So sometimes that is putting two and two together, and that is, and sometimes comedy happens, or the comedic timing coincides with that light bulb of something being implied going off in your head. So, thinking about comedy, I feel like it is very important to understand your voice in development if you're the one writing this, right? And it's very important to make yourself limitless in your thinking, in your creativity, and to create room for that, room for growth. It's also important to, find an editor or some kind of peer review, or like a small crowd, or just certain people that you test out certain materials with. That is also very important. And another thing is also important to understand the audience, and how you deliver something to them. And oh, it's very important to brand yourself in a way that doesn't box you in. And if you have branded yourself in a way that boxes you in the way people see, perceive, and digest you, it's also very important to find a way to break out of that box. So, for example, um, I feel like it is important to stand for something, but it's also important to not be, um, how do I say this? Like a tree by the roadside, swaying in all directions. Like, if somebody says, oh, you know, we should not make fun of this because of this. Like, it's important to understand why you don't want to make fun of that, because not because of what that person is saying, but actually how your own morals and your own ethics apply to that. Now, should I believe we should be more sensitive to people, but I also believe that we should not give into fear. And I feel like this is important when, if you're like an upcoming person that's writing something. Um, an artist that, again, now in 2004, 2000 and 2024 and 2025, I don't really know what this particular artist is doing with his career. I don't know where he's going with all this. It just seems like he's falling out of the, he's gone totally haywire to another side. But there was a time when Kanye West, where I was like, wow, this is very cool. When um, there was a time in his career where he broke out of a lot of boxes that people could have boxed him into as an artist. So he broke out of that, being just a beats guy. He broke out of that. He became a rapper, like he became a businessman, like he broke out of many boxes that people could have boxed him in. There was a time that I felt that way about him. Now, the Kanye West stuff now, I don't really follow um, a lot of his story now, so I can't speak to that because I don't really follow him like that. But there was a time in his career when I still used to be very tapped in, that I was like, wow, this is really cool. He's really broken out of this. You can't just say he is, you can't just think of him as, oh, this is the only thing he does. And as an artist, you have to, or as somebody that, if you're doing comedy, if you're writing comedy, if you're putting it in poetry, in plays, whatever, you have to find ways to make sure that you're not boxing yourself in. Do I feel like people need to stand for something? Yes. But you shouldn't, I don't feel like you should be that person on social media that, you know, just goes and backs up something that you don't even believe in. And then when you go and make jokes about that particular thing, you go, oh, but I'm a comedian. Everybody should be able to. take my joke. No. And also another thing, you shouldn't be stealing people's jokes, because then if you do that and you're expecting people to back you up, no one is going to back you up. So integrity is important, which is essentially what I'm saying. And it's also important to stand for something and not fall for everything, because um that's something that saves you, and that's also something that helps you and makes people, even those people don't really, if you're in the public eye, people don't really afford humanity to you. They expect you to uh be above certain things, and they expect, oh, because you make jokes now, I should be able to make a joke about something that's deeply hurtful to you. But I feel like standing for something and not falling for everything, and also being sensitive about certain things helps you. Like when you are in need, or when you are making a case for something, it helps you to be able to actually stand your ground. And it also screams, hey, I'm human, don't do this to me. You know what I mean? I feel like that's part of it. Now, will it always make people be compassionate and all this towards but example of this is J.K. Rowling. Now, people may not respect what she stands for, but they will respect that she stands for something, and she has never changed. That doesn't mean that she will never, you should always stand for something and never change your mind about it. No, but if you're always flip flopping, and you're doing something that affects a certain type of communication, that affects people's psyche, I feel like that messes with that integrity part, personally. So, yes, that brings us to the end of this. And comedy, as they say, or as I say, lives in the nitty gritty. It really does. And let's lean into it, okay? I love you.